Breaker, this is Striker Star 19 here, managing this mission with a brand new co-host. My friend Martin and I, watched the seasonal modern classic, question mark, The Witches. Martin, say hello to the audience.
Hello, audience. I'm happy to be here. It's a pleasure on this fine Halloween night.
Indeed. You may know Martin as my co-host on the Animates, which, if you don't know, is a series of cartoon retrospectives thus far that we perform on a separate channel. So if you like our dynamic here, there's a link in the description to check out more of those. Our most recent episode is also seasonal. That would be Extreme Ghostbusters, in addition to Tales from the Crypt Keeper, among many, many other episodes uploaded and coming soon. So I would recommend checking those out. We both watched The Witches, and Martin and I agreed to discuss it in a joint effort because The Witches is something that holds a lot of sentimentality to Martin. It's an old favorite of yours, correct?
It is both the book itself and the original 1990 film. I have a huge amount of attachment to. Reread the book many a time back in the day. Also had a cassette audio play of the book, which I remember incredibly well. um, and yeah, the original movie I used to watch all the time until I got to a point where I was slightly horrified by it, then didn't watch it for several years. So I was very excited about this one.
Yeah, I what's weird, I rotated a lot of Roald Dahl stories, as I think a lot of kids do when they're that perfect target age. I never actually read The Witches, and I never actually saw the old movie until this year when I heard they were remaking it. So we actually have precisely opposite experiences with this property.
Interesting. Have you read the book at all to this day?
No, no, I still haven't gotten around to it.
Ah, I see.
So
So
I'm relying on. Sorry, were you gonna?
I was just going to make the observation that I don't think a lot of people have. I think a lot of people forget there is a book and are basing their reactions to this movie on their experience of the original film.
It does seem to have a lot of the ubiquitousness. So that's why I'm relying on you a bit to be kind of my lore expert as well. Is there anything in the book that doesn't make it into either adaptation? I'm curious.
Um, is there? The only thing I can think of off the top of my head is like there's one bit where they're in the Grand High Witch's room and she's got a bunch of frogs in a cabinet. But apart from that, and I think he has to hide with the frogs. It's been a while since I've read the book. And she comes in, and the Grand High Witch makes a joke about throwing the frogs to the seagulls the following morning. um, that's the only sort of scene that I don't remember being in either one.
That sounds about right. I think Roald Dahl had a weird fascination with amphibians because that just makes me think of SEO Trot. Do you know that Roald Dahl story?
Yes, I don't think I've ever actually read SEO Trap, but I do know which one you mean.
I have no idea if I'm even saying it correctly because I've only read it. I don't think it's ever been adapted or we know how he intended it to be pronounced.
Well,
But just it's
it actually had an adaptation like fairly recently,
really,
which was it was a made-for-TV adaptation. It might be
huh?
on Netflix at the moment actually, but it's got Dustin Hoffman and Judy Dench.
What?
Yeah,
That's a bizarre thing to adapt because I remember being really, even as a kid, I was like, that was kind of a weak story because it's just a guy fools a woman by replacing her tortoise and then he just kind of gets away with it and that's the story.
yeah.
So
It's
I don't know
fairly
if Dustin
harmless.
Hoffman was like, I really resonate with this.
Apparently so.
Yeah. So, where was I? Lost my train of thought. Which of the two movies of the witches would you say is more faithful to the book?
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Because there's some very key differences I noticed. The endings are almost totally different, for one thing.
They're both, yeah, neither one is really a perfect adaptation. I'd say the new one is closer in tone to the book.
Really?
Um,
Oh, that surprises me a bit.
yeah, because I think even though Roald Dahl wrote sort of The Witches to be kind of a scary story, it's also very comedic and wacky and fun. It's not
Oh,
like
sure.
the tone of the 1990 movie is like horror film, which
Yeah,
just so happens to be aimed towards kids. But like, that's a horrifying film, and this one is much more. There's more of a spirit of adventure, I think, to this one, as opposed to the
yeah.
original one, where it's more like it's pretty grim up until the end.
I have to assume the ending is closer to the book in the original, though, right? Is that what they went with?
Yes, that's right. At the end of
Because
the
that seems vaguely like a Roald Dahl ending. Like he tends to bring in those Deus ex machinas and just kind of wrap everything up into a neat little package.
yeah, so in the book, the boy stays a mouse, and he says to the grandma, like, the grandma, I think in the book, this is one of the issues I had with the film. So in the book, the grandma is in her early 90s. um
Hmm.
she's not going to live for that much longer, and they acknowledge it and
Yeah.
say, you're a mouse now, you're not going to live for much longer. Neither am I. And the kid is like, well, maybe we'll die together, neither one of us will outlive the other. Let's spend our remaining years on this world trying to hunt down these witches. Whereas in the 1990 film, the Grand High Witch's secretary, who was annoyed because she didn't get invited to dinner, decides to reform at a last minute decision, and then changes the kid back into a human, which I don't think is terrible. A lot of people really
No.
hate that ending. I think after the harrowing journey that you have in the 1990 film, that's fine. I think a little bit of happiness at the end of that film is okay. I don't think it undermines the point of the rest of the movie.
I absolutely agree because when I hear you detail the ending of the book, I was like, "Oh, okay." I'm in
Yeah.
full. And then there's the new ending, which I burst out kind of laughing at because it's kind of ridiculous to be honest.
I sat with my mouth agape because of of all the things I expected to end this film was not a musical number with three CGI mice and Octavia Spencer singing "We Are Family" while they dance to a montage of travel pictures and a tour bus which they have built to hunt down all the other witches.
It doesn't look like they got any witch hunting done on those journeys. I think they just had fun.
Also, with like the massive bus with witch hunters on it, do you think the witches maybe saw them coming and were
I
like, that bus over there's got witch hunters on the side? Well, suspicious number of our ranks have been turning into mice lately. Do you think these two things are connected?
Gosh. And then like the whole recruiting bit, because they go through as you pointed out, they go through the book ending of, well, I'll just be very old and you'll just be very old.
Mm.
And then there's the post credits bit of like the recruiting where it's the Chris Rock mouse, the narrator voiced mouse, and Octavia Spencer like only showing age, having obtained glasses. It's like, so how much time has passed? And so, like, are they old? Like, what exactly is happening here?
Yeah, like, it works in the book because the grandma is in her 90s. Octavia Spencer is 50. She's That mouse is going to be dead long before Octavia Spencer dies.
It kind of reminds me of the Robot Chicken sketch of there's like a pub of it's parodies Alvin and the Chipmunks, and there's a public scandal that the Chipmunks are repeatedly dying, and Dave Seville just like replaces them to keep making albums. And he like comes out in a public like a PR thing and he goes, "Guys, they're chipmunks. I'm surprised you're just now figuring this out. I have like 10 in the basement just ready to go.
Yeah,
They
that's
live
not
to
a.
be maybe one."
Chris Rock isn't her grandson at all. Chris Rock is playing the man from the start of the film who helped her with her bags. She's turned him into a mouse to to try and
Wait,
like.
oh, I completely missed that. Wait.
No, that was a joke. That's not actually
Oh,
what happened.
okay. I thought you were serious. I was so confused by that ending that I just bought it. It's like,
It's telling that you thought that was a reasonable option, though.
because it just like the timelines because he has to have aged. So is he aging by mouse years? Did
Yes.
I just I'm at a loss there. But hey, Grand High Witch is pretty amazing in this version.
Yeah, I mean, I love every iteration of the Grand High Witch, I must say. Um, I think like Angelica Houston was obviously excellent as well. Um, she plays it more straight than Anne Hathaway, I think, but
Hmm.
not by much. um, and Anne Hathaway, like, she's more, I'd say she's much more in line with the Grand High Witch from the book, who is just kind of comedic but terrifying.
Hmm.
Whereas Angelica Houston was mostly just terrifying. She had a couple of comedy moments, but it's not like uh, it's more like things that are at her expense, like when she has to deal with people and
Hmm.
try and be normal. Whereas I think a lot of the humor does come from that, like the Grand High Witch just having to deal with normal people and just. But in this one, she's just such a weirdo. Like
Yeah.
in everything she has to do, she's very strange and slightly unhinged. But I thought it was a wonderful like scene stealing performance. I thought she was excellent, and I love the look.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Do you prefer like the original transformation where she looks like when she drops her facade and the wig comes off, she looks like a more traditional witch? Or do you like the snaky, more unhinged jaw predator look in this movie?
Well, I'm gonna say neither,
Oh,
because well, in the book when she takes off her mask, they like there is a picture of her in the book by the illustrator, and they describe it as looking a bit like a skull, but it's like sort of worm eaten, and she hasn't got a nose. And you
ah,
see that face in this film in one scene where she's looking in the hand mirror and the lightning flashes and it changes. And you
yes.
get a glimpse, and that's the face that's in the book. And I wanted to see that,
Holy
um,
smokes.
but they do it for like 2 seconds in that one scene, and then they don't bring it back. And I kept
Uh,
expecting during the meeting scene that she would at some point like flash and go to that face, and that would be the reveal. Um, and I don't know if maybe that was the intention at one point and they didn't go through with it and they changed it to the mouth thing, um, which I think is fine. That's an interesting addition. But
hmm.
yeah, I wish they'd gone with like that look where she looks into the mirror and like her nose isn't even there and like the face is sort of
Ugh,
decaying. That's a
that
really
sounds horrifying.
yeah. I mean, with the way they did that when she's looking in the mirror in the bedroom, that is I thought was really good, and I'm disappointed we didn't get to see more of that.
Right. But like sharp teeth and forked tongue remind me a lot of Melina from Mortal Kombat, so that's why I'm kind of fond of it. But I do kind of wish they went with. It would have been nice if maybe for like the final confrontation, it just all came off, and just under the pressure, that's the form she takes.
Yeah, I just wish we'd see more of it because it seems like they created a really good look, and it looked really creepy when they showed it to us.
It wouldn't wouldn't
I don't mind.
surprise me if they like went through the trouble of making that look, and it was just deemed like too scary, so they parsed down its like screen time.
Yeah, maybe it was too horrific. But I mean, the original one is very horrifying as well. But
No,
I
yeah.
guess it's more traditionally witchy rather than I don't know. I don't know which one is more terrifying. The prosthetics on the original Grand High Witch are very very impressive.
Wow, yeah, the practical wax, and I really appreciate that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that does look very good, and it's very horrifying when it happens. And like it has to unfold from behind the mask. That is very
Ugh,
creepy. I don't mind the big mouth smiley thing though. I think that's fine. I particularly like when she talks in like a raspier voice when the mouth starts moving. I enjoyed
mhm.
that and how it like goes back and forth if she's like angry mid sentence. That was pretty cool.
The choices are very intentional and thought out. I kind of like that. It looks like she's scarred in her design too, because those scars are just ready to rip apart and reveal all those rows of teeth. I thought that was a very strong choice.
Yeah, I think the little touches they add to the witches' mythology, where they've got like, yeah, as you say, the smiles, and the three claws instead of a normal
Yeah.
hand.
Well,
That's
I kind of called them pumpkin head paws because that's what they reminded me of.
yeah, I like that. And I like. I really enjoy her accent, however
Ugh.
inconsistent it might be throughout that film. But like everything she said in the accent kind of made me chuckle. Like when she kills the insubordinate witch, and she's like, "That was actually a good question, insubordinate, but a good question."
That was a great bit. I thought that was just very telling of what kind of leader she is.
Yeah. This is, I don't know if it's probably not intentional, but there's a scene in the film Time Bandits where the exact same thing happens and someone speaks up and he's like, if you're so powerful, my lord, why can't you leave this fortress? And the like the bad guy in that movie is Evil Genius. You
Mhm.
remember from like the David Warner villain. He like
Yeah, yeah.
immediately eviscerates the henchman, and there's just like an arm just hanging onto a console in the background. And after all the like the fire and effects have died down, he just goes, "It's a good question." The guy's already dead, but that just yeah reminded me of that. That made me laugh.
Yeah. There's also this weird anti-capitalist angle that they take with the Grand High Witch in that she kind of just hates the concept of money.
Yeah.
And that feels like the one Robert Zemeckis touch in this Robert Zemeckis movie that doesn't really feel like a Robert Zemeckis movie.
It's I they do portray the witches as being more overtly demonic in this. Like they are
Hmm.
literally like demonic creatures pretending to be people.
Yeah. So
Whereas in the
they're
original,
not like
it's
a
more like they're just like women who happen to have these weird deformities.
right.
Um, 'Cause she says something like, why does everything in this human world require money?" Um, So I just kind of took it as her just disliking humanity in general and not understanding why they needed these things. But then surely she has plenty of money and she uses it very well because she's got all these really expensive looking outfits. So
Yeah.
it doesn't, yeah, you're right. It doesn't quite add up.
Um and there's of course that leads to the bit of which of the soups is cheaper.
That's the funniest bit in the film. Which one is cheaper? We will have the spit pea soup.
And it's made without is there a reason it's made without garlic? Is it just to distinct do they have like a weakness to garlic? Is that ever like made super clear?
That's only a thing in this movie, and I think it gets mentioned by the grandma earlier on because she says like garlic is like, I guess it's like with vampires, garlic is like
Yeah,
a restorative type thing, so it affects them. Um,
gotcha.
but it was
That
kind
threw
of
me a bit.
pointless. It seemed like they'd made up the garlic thing just so they could get the witches to have the pea soup and no one else. But they could have just said,
Exclusively.
"Yeah, we're just making the pea soup for these guys because they've requested it."
Yeah.
There's that plot point in the original film where they this seems to be a difficulty for everybody adapting the witches, where they're like, well, we can't poison the soup because all the other guests are going to drink it, so we need to
Right.
acknowledge that they're not going to poison everybody in the hotel. There's always some really convoluted thing. Like in the original, it's the Bruno's dad asks for a different soup and they give him that soup and the grandma has to come and like smash the soup off his table before he drinks it. And in this it's the grandma asking about the garlic and it's like, you don't need all these details. Stop it, you're overthinking the soup situation.
I wouldn't put it past Roald Dahl to just be like acknowledge as a narrator they poisoned the soup and yes it may have poisoned some other people but it was worth it for the greater good. That just
Well,
seems like the kind of callous like ends to a meme he would pull.
there's that there's a line in the original film where one of the witches is like, what happens if a grown-up eats one of the candies from the shop? And the grand witch is like, well, that is just too bad for the grown-up. And that's, I imagine Roald Dahl had a similar like, Mr. Dahl, what happens if someone else at the hotel eats the pea soup? Well, that's just too bad for them.
I'm both impressed and a little at because I feel like they retained a lot of that Roald Dahl detail that I feel like it's a very Roald Dahl thing to say if it's an ugly woman she's a witch whereas like because they go into the thing of like, if they're bald, they're a witch. Where it's like bald women aren't uncommon or ugly these days. They could be bald for any number of reasons. So I like the faithfulness that they kept that detail, but I'm also a little like, come on, man, you know?
Yeah. It's meant in some ways a cautionary tale, in some ways emblematic of Roald Dahl's rampant anti-Semitism. So
Yeah.
he had his views, unpleasant though they were.
Whoops a daisies. Which also brings me to the grandma. Did you have a read on when this movie was supposed to take place? 'Cause
Um,
it feel like I don't see anyone have like a cell phone, but I just had a hard time getting a read on if there was something intentional with the choice there, or like it feels a bit timeless that way.
I believe it's meant to be set in, I want to say 1950s.
Hmm. I only because like in the original, I don't know if this was in the book. Another thing that just kind of puzzled me a bit was in the first movie there was the whole plot point of the grandma having diabetes,
Hmm.
which somehow translated to her having like cold symptoms. And as someone who doesn't have diabetes, knock on wood, um, I don't know if that's a thing people with diabetes get or if that's just an older idea of it. Whereas the grandma in this movie never explicitly says she has diabetes, but she is vaguely sick, and it kind of goes
God.
nowhere.
Yeah. In the book, she smokes too many cigars, and she's really old. So they're like, "Cut down on the
Oh.
cigars, woman, or you're gonna die." And she's like, "Oh, fine, fine, fine." And then, yeah, the diabetes thing, I don't understand. Doesn't make any sense. And in this movie, she just gets that cough, which I didn't pick up on this, but someone said she starts coughing right after the witch from Alabama, who I believe is called Zelda in this film, because I looked it up. Um,
Oh.
she says curses, and then she walks off, and that's when the grandma coughs. And someone was like, "Oh, well, that was her cursing the grandma." And I
Oh.
personally didn't interpret it that way.
No.
Maybe that was the intention. She gets cursed, and then after that witch dies at the end, she does. Well, she doesn't cough in the epilogue, so I don't know.
That'd be
Who
a mood
knows?
killer.
Was that bit where the Granto witch is like, "Oh, that's a nasty cough you've got there," and she doesn't really acknowledge it either. She's like, she doesn't say, "Oh, you've been cursed." So I don't know. Yeah, the cough goes nowhere. It's pointless. I guess maybe it
So
was
silly.
their intention to say, like, "Oh, well, she's sick, so that's our excuse for Octavia Spencer, a 50-year-old woman, dying at the same time as this mouse in
Yeah.
years." I don't think it was particularly well thought out.
No. And then what I was expecting was when the boy orders the big breakfast for his grandma. It's got all the decadent food. I thought that was going to be like the reveal of I can't eat this because it would make my blood sugar spike because I have diabetes. Like I thought that's what they were going for. But then it turns out it was just kind of a fun bit, if not a bit pointless. Though that boy almost definitely wasted like $150 because
I was gonna
room
say,
service food is wildly expensive.
and that's meant to be like the most expensive hotel ever, isn't it? And they
I know.
multiple on multiple occasions in that movie they draw attention to the fact that it's a big swanky establishment.
He like turns into a mouse and she's like, "Oh no, I have to turn you back." Then she like sees the hotel bill and just like sweeps him under the bed or something. I'd have been pissed.
Speaking of the hotel, what did you think of Stanley Tucci?
Oh yeah, I didn't so this isn't I didn't even realize that was him until it was pointed out to me. It's not his biggest like when I think of Stanley Tucci, I think of Caesar Flickerman from the Hunger Games.
Yeah.
And so maybe just I have he didn't actually leave a huge impression on me, though I did like how well he played just like having to please this witch woman as a concierge and just the reactions of okay, you know, maybe I've served worse, but I guess I'll figure this out.
I like how he's always like throughout the course of the movie, he every time he has to deal with her, it gets more stressful. culminating in that scene where she's just like, "Where's Twilight Stupid?" and he just jumps back, and he's like, "Oh, the piece open." He's like terrified.
Poor guy. And you could, is he also the one who tells Octavia Spencer that she can't have any of the soup?
No, I think
Or is that
that's
different?
just a random waiter. Yeah.
Just a random waiter. Okay, because I would have liked just like I don't really understand it either. I'm just kind of managing what they asked for.
Yeah, that would have been like much easier though. Well, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
madam, but they have explicitly said you cannot have any of their soup, and that would have been fine. You didn't need to create a garlic subplot.
Yeah, yeah, actually now that you mention it, that would have made a lot more sense. What can you do?
I don't think
So
he's not quite as
sorry, go on.
a multifaceted character as the hotel manager from the original movie, who was played by Rowan Atkinson. Um,
Oh
he's got
yeah.
like his own subplot where he's sleeping with the maid, and then he has to like he's got all these different jobs on the go, and like the end of the movie, he literally kills the Grand High Witch at the end of
Oh
the
yeah.
film. And it's such a weird sort of character arc for him to just deal with all this crazy stuff that's going on.
Ugh.
So yeah, he definitely gets more screen time than Stanley Tucci's hotel manager, I think.
I would have liked if Stanley Tucci killed the Grand High Witch in this one, only because I feel like that's a bit more cathartic than the cat she was kind of mean to, question mark.
Yeah, was the cat annoyed with her, or did it just eat her because she was a rat at that point? I didn't.
I think because earlier in the movie she makes the cat stay in her cage.
I love how annoyed she is with the cat for for
I
sitting.
didn't even want the cat.
I also love how she can never remember the hotel manager's name throughout the film. He's hotel man and then Mr. Cage Procurer.
Anne Hathaway's just clearly having a lot of fun. I wouldn't be surprised if she improvised a lot of that.
It was very and what does she calls I just like how she can't remember anybody's name, and at the end she calls the grandma little stupid soon to be dead woman.
Just trying to grasp the human language, perhaps, and just piling words on top of each other.
Yeah, I like how she's just like a very strange person in this world, and to interact with her you must be like, what's wrong with this person?
This might be me having just really poor memory again. Was Daisy a character in the old movie and I blocked her out of my memory, or is this new to this movie?
She was, but she didn't talk. She was just a mouse that the
That
kid had as pet.
that explains why I knew like the kid had a pet. I couldn't remember. I was like, is this new to this movie? Was that in the book?
Yes, he has the mice in the book. Oh, another thing that never made into either movie actually is the he when he brings his mice into the meeting room, they run onto the stage, and someone in the audience is just like, "Oh, it's a child on the stage! It's been turned into a mouse!" And the Grand High Witch is like, "No, these are just ordinary mice." And then she just like kicks them off the stage, and I don't think you see them again afterwards.
Oh my gosh.
Murders his pet mice.
So to be clear, does Daisy talk in the book though?
No, she does not.
Okay. All
She's
right, because that
definitely
struck
not a
me as a
child
bit.
that's been transformed.
I could see why that's an intuitive choice to make, but it struck me as a bit pointless.
It kind of was, yeah. I guess maybe they wanted another, like a female character or something, but there's already quite a few female characters in the film, so it's not
True.
entirely necessary to add another one.
I can because I can see being like, oh, what if this mouse was also I would have like personally, I would have gone with the choice that Bruno and the boy work with this mouse who seems very intuitive and but doesn't talk. And it's like an ambiguous thing of like, are mice really this like inquisitive of creatures who are just good at this kind of thing? Or maybe this was once a human, maybe their fragile psyche lost to however much time as a mouse. I think that would have been a more interesting choice.
I think so. Yeah, I agree. Might have lent itself better to like the CG animation as well.
True. I guess it would have been hard to have a mouse like that dance to "We Are Family."
Yeah.
That I was just. Uh, I don't love the CGI in this movie. I guess that's an like.
No.
There's something about it that just struck me as very Disney-ish, and it just did not click with me.
nothing. They didn't go for realism
Mm-mm.
because the thing that stuck out the most to me is the cat. The cat looks incredibly fake. Um,
Yeah,
and the
would have
big
been.
chicken at the start, I think that was the first moment for me that took me out of the film because I was like, why have you CGI'd a chicken? Could you not find a chicken anywhere? Did you need to create one?
It wouldn't have been hard. Was Anne Hathaway just like, I'm not holding a cat? Are you kidding me? Is she like allergic?
Maybe that's the reason. Because the cat doesn't do anything particularly ridiculous. All she really
No.
needed to do is hold the cat, and then the cat has to knock over a glass. Oh,
Yeah,
there's one point where it
exactly.
shimmies down a drain pipe, but I feel like you could have cut that scene. That's not really essential to the plot.
Cut that scene or just like make the CGI cat for that, like distinguishable enough, and then
Yeah,
just do a normal cat for everything else.
yeah. I don't understand.
Hmm.
There's an excessive use of CGI in this, which isn't really necessary.
And again, just strikes me as very off-brand for Robert Zemeckis, who pioneered a lot of really good practical effects. Like this next to Roger Rabbit is almost a bit embarrassing, I'd say.
Well, he loves his CGI these days, doesn't he? Like his
You know
Poe's
what? You have a
voice
point.
and the horrifying.
Mars Needs Mom.
Yeah, he's still peddling that.
Perhaps more a creator of his time then. Perhaps I hold him in romanticized light because I was just thoroughly. I'm only like so harping on that because I'm listening to a podcast. It's called Blank Check, and they like cover a different director. Like movie by movie. They're like, this is our month of Robert Zemeckis, and we're going to cover his career. And his work on Back to the Future is just so intentional and immaculate. And same with Roger Rabbit. Just hearing about those details really got me into him. That is just a little sobering to come back to just how it sounds a little mean, but just how soulless some of his choices can feel these days with like all the CGI. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wonder what it would have been like if he'd made this movie in the 80s or something.
I would have liked to see that.
Hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, what is, do you know the production like, because like the Witches older movie, it's relatively a household name. I heard of it a good deal before I watched it, but it's not nearly as big as say Charlie the Chocolate Factory, what have you, BFG. No, that one's not huge either. Matilda, that's another big one.
Yeah.
Was it kind of an independent venture? Was just one guy like, I really like this story, or was it kind of big for its time?
Um, I do not know. Well, I mean, it had like Jim Henson was involved in it doing the practical effects. So,
Ah, okay.
yeah,
That's
he
pretty
did.
cool. I didn't actually know that.
Yeah, the Jim Henson and Co. did like the Grant Eye Witch makeup and the mice and things like that. So I think
That's
it was a fairly sort of large scale production at the time. I don't think it did particularly well.
hmm,
Maybe that was just because of like, well, I'd say both that movie and this movie have, well, the 90s movie is consistent in tone, but it's a very dark tone. And this movie is not consistent in tone. this is this
yeah.
movie is all over the place.
And that's a little bit of what kind of held me back from like loving it as much as I think I could have. Is that it is a little, just a little flighty that way.
I think I actually like the first half an hour of this movie, I think is the best part of the film. Um,
Hmm,
like just where it's the boy and the grandma and they're in this little town, and she's trying to sort of bring him out of his sadness, as he says. Um,
yeah.
those moments are really nice and it's more sort of grounded. And I think having it in that little town where there just happens to be like that creepy witch lurking around, that could have been a story in and of itself. Um,
Wow, you have a point. Yeah, 'cause it does have that very homey feel. Yeah, I wonder if there's another take in there. That would have been interesting.
I think Witch with Snake could probably have carried a movie as well, because she's kind of a
Yeah,
creepy looking character.
I'd be down for that.
This is my Witches extended universe.
Coupled with our spin-off cartoon we pitched in our Street Sharks animates. I still like that idea too.
Yeah.
Um, I guess my final thoughts on this, or what this movie made me think of, was Roald Dahl, like how he didn't like the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory movie, but how there's still so many adaptations of his work And I think of how like Dr. Seuss's family saw the live action Cat in the Hat and was like, no more adaptations. We're putting our foot down. Whereas Roald Dahl was like, I don't like this adaptation of my work, and then just was like an ellipsis. He was like, but don't stop. I don't. So it struck me as like he probably like would have just signed off on any number of things, which is why it's kind of neat that his work is so malleable that anyone can have a take on it. But this doesn't look like something he'd be super impressed with. But I still really liked the bits and pieces, like the beginning, like you said, some of the atmospheric stuff in the Grand High Witch is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, apparently he did. He liked the original Witches movie. This is my recollection of this. I see different
Mm.
variations of it everywhere. But I think the fact is he liked the movie, um, but then they changed his ending to the happier ending, and that was when he was like, "Nope, don't like it." So until
Uh,
that point, he enjoyed it. And then he said it was terrible and it was a disgrace and blah 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 blah, just because he didn't like that they had changed that ending from the book.
Interesting.
Which I can understand being annoyed, but I don't think that invalidates the rest of that film.
Oh, totally. Yeah, yeah.
He was a man who
Uh,
seemed to have issues with like everything. So let's,
yeah, he seems very fickle and a bit bitter.
yeah, and hold some strange views, which which we will not agree with, obviously.
No.
Doesn't
What
seem
was
like the
it?
nicest of people, really, but a
No.
good writer, I will say,
Man,
um,
yeah, yeah.
and good
Do you
concepts.
know? Would you happen to? I don't know if you would know this, so don't feel pressure. Do you know if he passed away before Matilda came out? Because I feel like that's the other big one.
He passed away shortly after The Witches. Whether the
I
two
see.
were related, whether he had like a heart attack after he saw the
Oh,
ending,
God.
I
Uh,
couldn't say. But yeah, shortly
I'm
after.
going.
I imagine
He's
he
like,
was.
I don't like this. He's like, I don't like this witch's movie, and then the Grand High Witch pops out of the screen and turns him into a mouse.
Well, a fitting end for Roald Dahl.
Some say as a mouse he's still writing stories to this day, but as a mouse he only like jumps on keys one at a time. So he's been working on one book this entire time.
He will
It's
hate
like
the
it's called
adaptation.
it's called iPhone McDougal, and it's a cautionary tale about being on your phone too much.
Someone gets killed with a phone. He'll kill anyone at any time in any of his books in a horrible
A
way.
fat bald kid is
Yeah.
looking at his phone too much and gets hit by a car. That's what it would be. Because I always felt like I don't know if Chocolate Factory came before or after Witches, but he wrote Bruno and he wrote Augustus because he was really pissed off at fat kids and he wasn't done taking out his anger.
Augustus Gloop could easily have been Bruno in this film, really, couldn't he?
Just like AU. He's
Yeah.
uh,
This
it
goes
was
back to
such a
my
weird
role.
choice. Another weird choice that I forgot to mention is that Bruno's parents don't want him at the end of this movie.
Oh yeah, yeah. But in the original, it's kind of touching, and they're like, "Oh, don't worry, dear. That's our boy. She's got there. He might be a mouse, but he's still our son." And in this, they're just like, "Nope, nope. We're leaving. We're checking out of the hotel."
Go dance with the other mice. I don't.
One thing I was going to mention that I think for me, this is my biggest disappointment with this film.
Hmm.
Um, is that the witches themselves, other than the Grand High Witch, and you've got the Zelda, who's the witch from the start, who has a little bit of screen time, and the only other one who really has any lines. The witches themselves don't really do anything. Um, like even the scenes in the meeting, they are completely blank faced. None of them
Yeah.
react to anything. They are not the best of extras.
Hmm.
Whereas if you watch that conference room scene from the original film, and just throughout the film, like there's at least like four named witches in that movie,
Yeah.
who are like in different scenes and have their own little distinct personalities. In this, there isn't. They don't really get any lines, and they don't get any development. They don't really have any conversations with the Grand High Witch or anything. They're literally just stuck into that meeting scene, and that's it. like there's nothing really to them. They kind of bland. Um, and one of the best things I thought about that original film is the way they react during that conference room, and everyone is a little bit different, and some are kind of stupid,
Totally.
and some of them are kind of more intelligent and seem to be knowing a bit more about what's going on. And some of them are just weirdos. And I liked that mix. And in this, yeah, there's only Anne Hathaway's the only one with a personality, really.
I totally agree. And I think there is a slight issue inherent to maybe the story itself in that because the witch, like because the characters are mice, they dodge confrontation a lot. Whereas it would have been nice if maybe before the soup stuff, there was maybe an encounter or two with other witches who like try to get rid of the mice for the Grand High Witch, and that would have been a good opportunity to just create a few extra subordinate witches, maybe for comedic relief, get some good character actresses in there, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because you've got you've got Zelda, who gets a couple of lines here and there, and she's got quite a distinctive look. And you've got the British witch. I think all she does is open a door, but she gets a couple of lines. So maybe they could have paired those two up and sent them after the mice or something. Or
Yeah.
had a little chase scene in the middle of the movie. I think that might have helped. Because in the original film, you've got that big scene where he escapes the conference room and they're all running after him. Um, and you've got like, even with the Grand High Witch, you've got her little secretary who follows her around everywhere. And those two have got like this kind of fun relationship where they've got a bit of banter going on. And I think just more like that would have shown them interacting would have helped.
I totally agree. Yeah, it does seem like it's just a bit hindered by being kind of a short kid story and kind of a short movie. It could have been maybe a tiny bit longer just to flesh out some of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think so. A bit more stuff could have happened at the hotel, I think.
Yeah.
And trim a bit off the end. Trim the dance number at the end.
Yeah, true.
I really like how the Grand High Witch doesn't eat the soup in this one. Um,
Yes.
she gets distracted and walks over to the grandma when she recognizes her, and then they have another confrontation. And I think that's a much better ending for that character than just, oh, she's eating the soup as well, it's over. And everything, it's a bit too easy in the original story. Whereas in this, it gives you more of a satisfying climax, I think.
I do agree. Yeah. I do like the bit where she's like, "Oh, oh, I did not eat your soup." She like pretends for a minute. That's
Yeah.
great.
I think there's that other bit as well where you think she's about to transform and then she just makes a chicken noise.
Yeah.
And she keeps expecting something to happen. And I did not drink the soup.
Wonderful.
That is cool. So yeah, just seeing her get a bit more of a, and you never actually see her die at the end. So
True.
you never know.
Sequel.
Yeah, I think if there's any Roald Dahl book that demands a sequel, you could get a whole universe out of the witches.
That is true. I mean, it always kind of bewildered me that there is a sequel to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory as a book, and
Yeah.
I've never heard anyone actually describe like what it is. Like, I don't know anything about it.
Well, prepare yourself. Do you do you have any idea what happens in the sequel?
I know it's called Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, so I'm assuming it takes place just right at that point. He bolts off out of the ceiling, and besides
Yes.
that, I really know nothing.
Ah, well. Brace yourself because let me describe the plot of that of that book
Oh,
to you.
I'm ready.
So, the Great Glass Elevator goes into space.
Go on.
I'm trying to remember the details because it's been so long since I've read it. Um, Let me see if I can find like a synopsis to read to you because I don't want to get it wrong. Um, Here we go. Uh, Charlie and his family are aboard the Great Flying Elevator. The elevator accidentally goes into orbit, and Mr. Wonka docks them at the Space Hotel USA. Their, their,
What?
their interception of the hotel is mistaken by approaching astronauts and hotel staff and listeners on Earth as an act of space piracy, and they are variously accused of being enemy agents, spies, and aliens. The rest of the book is they get attacked by the Venetius Canids, who you may remember being referenced in the first book, just in like a throwaway line. In this, they are shape-changing aliens,
What on
and they
earth?
have to stop them from invading the planet. It
I'm
ends
not.
with the President of the United States invites the family and Mr. Wonka to the White House to thank them for their space rescue.
I I am gobsmacked. I had what on earth? I feel like people like really wanted a Wonka sequel, and Roald Dahl was just like, "Oh, you want a Wonka sequel? Have all the Wonka in the world." Writes him going into space.
Yeah, there you go. Tim Burton never made that
Oh,
one.
no. I feel like maybe he should have. It's like he uses the Mars Attacks aliens. That'd be cool.
That'd be good. Do that, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a good note to wrap this up. Do you have any more extraneous thoughts?
Um, I that is a good question, insubordinate, but a good question.
Fire spills.
No, I don't. I'd say I mostly enjoyed this. Don't know how much I would have enjoyed it without Anne Hathaway's scenery chewing. But I thought Octavia Spencer was very good. I would happily watch Octavia Spencer Witch Hunter in some sort of sequel slash prequel to this. I'd say generally probably not as good as the 1990 film. I think that holds up a bit better. But this is fine. Not bad by any means. One of the better Roald Dahl adaptations in general, I would say.
Yeah. I think we're pretty much on the same page in that regard. I thought it was okay. It's pretty good. I think we pretty much covered it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I hope everyone listening has a safe and spooky Halloween. I'm gonna be enjoying the Darkstalkers OVA probably. I hope everyone. Oh, and check out the animates if you're thinking to yourself, no, it's this is over. I had so much fun listening to these two fine gentlemen discuss Halloween things. Well, if you check out the animates, you can see us discuss even more. So don't let the Halloween party end just because you may be stuck inside, depending on where you live.
Which one is cheaper?
My we start charging premium for animates. Which of our episodes would be most expensive? How do we? I think the longer we go off track, the more it costs. So our Street Sharks one is like premium $100 subscription.
I think due to the therapy costs involved, the Busby episode. I've called him the wrong name
Ah,
again.
wonderful. Ugh. To stave off the lawsuits from those people who didn't want us to see those canceled cartoons.
Waiting for him to come in.
Yeah. Well, happy Halloween, everybody.